Never say you can't do something, or that something seems impossible, or that something can't be done, no matter how discouraging or harrowing it may be. Human beings are limited only by what we allow ourselves to be limited by, our own minds. We are each the masters of our own reality. When we become self-aware to this, absolutely anything in the world is possible. Master yourself, become the king of the world around you. Let no odds, chastisement, exile, doubt, fear, or any mental virus prevent you from accomplishing your dreams. Never be a victim of life. And this week's opening quote comes from Mike Norton. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Egan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. I've been getting a great deal of emails lately from people, mainly young people, who are having a little bit of a difficult time making it through this world, this reality. I mean, the situation that they're growing up in is certainly vastly different to the situation I grew up in. The world is very different now to what it was back when I was a child. So I'd like to attempt to address some of these questions that people are directing towards me, and also some of the comments that have been posted on YouTube clips lately, and to try to create some sort of perhaps a philosophical overview of how I've approached certain situations in my life, in the hope that this may perhaps assist some people in the situations that they're finding themselves in today. This is a little bit of a step away from what you normally hear me talking about on these shows, but I just think it's necessary because of the amount of emails that I'm getting from people, and they really are coming from vast walks of life and all different age brackets as well, but hopefully I can create some sort of a dialogue that may provide answers for a number of people along the way. The thing is that though we are all victims of this society, essentially we are. I mean, our education system, the way we're kept permanently in debt, everything that this system does to curtail human potential is there. So you are behind the eight ball to start with. Don't let me get away from that. Everybody is behind the eight ball simply by being born into this world with this current economic model. But even though that is a reality, there are still ways through this world and through this life. And the real issue for many people is perhaps an issue that is one of the most uncomfortable issues for them to face. Because as disturbing as it is to admit it, the reality is that there's a great many people who go through this existence living their life as a victim. And if you look a little deeper, what you find is that in such cases, people are generally victims of themselves during their own lives. I mean, sure, we tend to judge other people through our lives because we're programmed to do it, but we very often don't notice just how much we are judging ourselves along the way. This was certainly the case for me when I was younger. I was most certainly my own worst enemy in anything that I tried to do. I had way too much stake in the outcome of anything that I attempted to do, and therefore I judged myself poorly. And this problem has very much been compounded in the modern world. The modern youth has been virtually brutalized compared to the way I grew up, and I used to feel this way back in the 60s and 70s. I just felt like I didn't really have any real worth because I couldn't figure out why I was so different to everybody else. I mean, I was always confident in who I was, and I always felt like I had some sort of a purpose, but then there was the darker side. There was the side that viewed society as being real and always supported the concept that I needed to find a place in that society, and I just couldn't do it because I found it all so superficial. All of the activities that people used to indulge in, even the conversations that people used to have, I found them completely meaningless. And so I was never able to step into that world. I simply couldn't function in that world. I tried working in businesses where I was selling things to people and all sorts of stuff like that, and I just couldn't do it. It was just completely meaningless to me. And because it was meaningless to me, I simply could not understand how anybody else could actually do that. And in many ways, I kind of secretly envied people's ability to be able to conform to the system. So I just generally felt like some sort of misfit, and so I generally beat myself up over it all the time. I viewed myself as not being successful simply because I didn't measure up to the social standards the system had provided to me, because I believed these social standards actually meant something. I mean, I actually used to envy people's ability to be able to talk about nothing, and I could not for the life of me fathom how they were able to have these conversations, because they simply didn't mean anything. They were just talking about the weather or what was on the television. I mean, nothing of any importance at all, and they all seemed to be quite involved in it, and I just never could figure out where to put a comment in. And if I did put a comment in, it was like, oh my God, why are you being so serious all the time? And it wasn't that I was being serious, it's just that I wanted to talk about real issues. And nobody wanted to do that. Well, nobody that I really knew anyway. I mean, they were all very nice people and all of that sort of thing, but they had this incredibly magical ability, and an ability that I found quite enviable, to be able to talk about absolutely nothing with an incredible amount of interest and to be wonderfully entertained by it all. And I just couldn't figure this out at all. I mean, it was a kind of a weird situation. It was kind of, I was in one mind of feeling like a complete misfit, and on the other side, I felt that what I was doing was completely right. I thought that everybody else was crazy and that I was the one who was sane. And I think this is common for most people. But you get to a point in life where you think, well, it's just not working for me. Why does everything go wrong? Maybe it's not me who's the smart one. Maybe I'm the insane one and everybody else is normal. So you do have these periods. It's a kind of a love-hate relationship that you develop with yourself during the youthful part of your life. Very often people develop this type of relationship with themselves, unless they can go and immerse themselves in some business or some company or some career or apprenticeship or whatever, to gain that sort of focus and have that goal to achieve. Many people who go through school and think that all of this stuff's meaningless and it's really all about living the life, generally get to a point halfway through their life or through their youth where they really wonder what it's about and wonder if they're simply a misfit and perhaps they should have gone and got that career that all their friends were getting in high school. Of course, many people don't pursue these careers because it just seems so wrong to them. It seems so unnatural. It feels to them that they are stepping so far off their path, and they wonder why they should ever have to do such a thing. And so they go and step onto their path in life and they find some way of making it through. But then they find themselves struggling an inordinate amount compared to what their friends are, and they wonder if they made the right choice. This is sort of the situation that I was in when I was a teenager. I was working as a musician, but I was also wondering why I couldn't be like other people. And this is very often the case for most of the youth and even people early in adulthood. They go through a certain crisis point where they really wonder if they are on the right path. And if you really step back and look at this, what you begin to realize is that all of this is due to programming. When I was young, the invention of the television really changed life in my house. It really did. And when I look back on it and I see what television did to influence myself, to influence my family, and to influence people around us, it really is quite remarkable. All of the social visions that I had of what society could be, all of these come from the television, and generally this will be the same for most people out there. Most of the standards that you set for yourself come from the images that are portrayed to you on television. Television portrays a very, very different world to the real world. Even when you're looking at a city on television, it just looks different on film. You see a place on screen and they get it from the right camera angle and they get the people with the right lighting on them, and things look larger than life. They look too real to be real, and you find yourself immersed in situations more than you would be immersed in real life situations. And again, this is done usually from the lighting and the camera angles, and there's all sorts of subliminal programming that goes into the way they set these scenes up in the movies. And you'll find that just watching a movie that you don't even think has any programming in it, just watching some comedy show on TV, if you can really look at the subtext of the show, the comedy show or the movie or whatever it is you're watching, look at how the scenery is set up. Notice what's on the desks. Notice the furniture in the room. Notice the decorations in the rooms that they use. Notice the clothes people are wearing. Notice the body language when they interact with each other. And notice the underlying themes of the conversation, how they are influencing your thoughts and your opinions. The mainstream media has brought this to a fine art. For example, you notice when you watch the news, there's always two anchor people there. And when they have a story that is particularly interesting, at the end of the story, they'll have a little conversation with each other, a couple of quick quips. Someone may comment on, gee, what a terrible story that was, and how people must feel whatever about it. And the other anchor person will nod their agreement and have their little quip. And that will instill that mindset into the minds of the viewer and assure the viewer that this is the way they should also be thinking about this if they are to be perceived as an intelligent person. Because, of course, the newsreaders are very intelligent. I mean, look at them, the way they dress, and they sit there all prim and proper with their very nice news voices. And apart from the story that they have just given you, they've also given you their impression, and they present this vision of what society is and how you should think about what they just told you. And all of these things are designed to influence our view of the society around us and essentially our view of ourselves. And this filters down into influencing how we judge ourselves and how we judge the people around us and the people we come into contact with. I mean, just look at the fashion that the young kids wear around today. There's always this need to fit into a certain group or fit into a certain scene or to make some type of individual statement. You know, people often believe they are the way they dress. That is who they are. This is my package. This is how I present myself. This is who I am. And very often they miss out on themselves along the way because they're attempting to be something that they're not. They think that they have to be something. They have to be this image of themselves that they have in their mind before they will be deemed successful according to their own standards. It's a weird kind of a programming that we put ourselves through, but what we do very often through all of this is we miss out on our lives. We miss out on the development of our true selves. And that is why we judge ourselves poorly, because we never reach these standards that we set for ourselves. We have this vision which is unobtainable, which comes from the television anyway. It's not who we are. And really, if we were just comfortable with who we are and we focused more on being that, we would find that we would probably be quite successful in our lives, because really, being who we are is what we came here to do, not all the other stuff. That's just a distraction, and that's why it's there. And many of these goals that we aspire to really don't mean anything anyway. We have all these visions of where we should be, but once we get there, we realize that it's really just the same as where we were. Now that we've got the golden egg, there's nothing really there, so we may as well have looked at ourselves for the journey anyway and may as well have stayed on our own path. And that's what many people are afraid of doing when they're young, is staying on their own path and being true to who and what they are. You know, people judge themselves poorly because they have these visions of where they should be, but it's always according to someone else's parameters. So if you're in a situation in your life where you're having these doubts about yourself and about what you should be doing, about who you are, perhaps you just need to really look inside yourself and examine what you really want to do. Because what you want to do is what you should be doing. And you may think that there are all sorts of barriers in the way of what you want to do, but ask yourself how many of these barriers are you putting there yourself? Because very often, if you look a little deeper, you'll find that many of them don't exist. These are just fears that you have of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And don't feel bad about it. I mean, we all have these fears and reservations, but sometimes we just let them control our lives and overwhelm us. And again, this is because people have a stake in the outcome. People have a stake in the outcome because they have this vision of what the future should look like. You know, people who want to go on a holiday, they want to leave the country and go and do something, they believe that if they work really hard, they'll be able to do this. And they get themselves in a position where, okay, they find a good job that gets a good wage, and so they move into a unit nearby the job, and then they've got to pay rent, and then, of course, they've got to get to work, so they buy a car or purchase a vehicle of some kind so they can get to work, and then they find that they have to put fuel in the vehicle in order to get to work. So they find that they bought the vehicle so that they can get to work, and the work that they're doing is basically paying for the running costs of the vehicle and the running costs of the unit that they rented. So the whole thing cancels itself out by default, and they are left with a small amount left over with which to feed themselves, and then they're able to put away a pittance every week in the hope that they may save up and hopefully do what they want to do. But all of that energy they're putting into this event is really just perpetuating the cycle because everything is supporting everything else. The unit and the vehicle you acquire in order to be able to perform the work, but everything that you gain during the work only supports the running costs of the vehicle and the unit. So why are you doing that? I mean, you could get rid of the vehicle, stay with friends for a little while, work for 2 weeks, save up enough money to buy an air ticket and actually go somewhere and do something and just land in a backpacker somewhere and see what happens. And if you've got stuff that you need to put somewhere, well, put it somewhere. Sell it or put it in storage or whatever. But if there's somewhere you want to go and something you want to do, I suggest you just go and do it and see what happens. You know, in 2012, I got an invitation to go to an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. It required going overseas for 10 days. And that's what I did. I went overseas for 10 days. I ended up staying away for 3 months. And I went right around the world. And when I arrived home, I had exactly the same amount of money in my pocket as what I had when I left. And that was just by following synchronicities and not having any stake in the outcome. You know, we have this vision of what we should be in our lives, and we have this vision, as I said, of what the future should look like, but we're not really prepared to really throw ourselves to it and just let it unfold, because we have these visions and we work so hard towards them, and we plan these holidays or whatever, and then we even have a vision of what the holiday should look like. We're not just going out and enjoying the world, we're working our lives away in order to save enough money to get away from the position that we're in for just a little while. That's basically what a vacation is. I mean, what is the point of that, folks? There's a lot more to life than working so you can get away from where you are and go out to the designated enjoyment zones that governments have created for you around the place. And it's interesting too, the way we do this. As I said, we even have a stake in the outcome of our holidays. We think because we've worked so hard and we've saved up for so long, we've spent so much money on getting there, do we need to enjoy ourselves? We virtually have some sort of meter whereby we measure our enjoyment level of our journey. And we go to all these places and we have them all checked off and make sure we go and see everything we can possibly see, but we don't really see any of it because we are on such a tight schedule that quite often many people who go off on a vacation, when they get home, they need to have a vacation from their vacation because they are exhausted. They didn't really get to take a break at all. They just went off to one of the designated enjoyment zones and they saved up for months upon end to do it because they think that's what life is about. But unfortunately, many people are simply caught in this cycle. Many people who really don't want to be part of the system are just caught in the cycle, and once you get on that treadmill, it's very difficult to know how to get off. And I totally do empathize and sympathize with people that are in that position. I mean, I'm not just here saying, hey, all stand up and jump away from the system. It's not as easy as that. It can be quite difficult for some people to do. But it's understanding that you are caught in one of these cycles that is half the problem. That's half the battle, realizing that you're in this cycle. And you can get to a point where you can start looking around you at the possessions that you have and the rental that you live in or whatever, and the things that you've acquired, the things that you believe make you you, which they don't. They're really just stuff that holds you to that spot. Start thinking about whether you really need many of these things, what you can sell, what you can get rid of, what you can put in storage, and maybe you can go and do something and find yourself if you get outside of your comfort zone. You know, just traveling a little bit will really open up your mind and give you an incredibly different perspective of society. It really will. I cannot encourage people enough to get out and travel the world a little bit and see what's going on, because it vastly changes your perspective of yourself and of the position that you're in at home. Many times you may travel and come back to your position and realize the absolute futility of staying there and realize the futility of the path that you've been on. And maybe it will go some way to help you discovering yourself. But really, these sorts of things are important. I mean, I think we are supposed to be a lot more nomadic than we are. We are supposed to be a lot more freer than we are anyway. And we should be free to do these sorts of things. And it's important for people to understand as well how brutalized they have been by this social system. I mean, many of the reservations people have about themselves, many of the problems that I'm seeing developing in younger people, simply their inability to be able to identify with this world or even identify with themselves properly, is a result of the environment that these children are forced to grow up in, the chemicals that the children are fed through their lives. And many people are subject to so many toxins on so many levels, and it happens from birth and often from before their birth. Often many people are subject to toxins and chemicals while they're in the womb, unbeknownst to their parents. Even parents who have very good diets or believe they are having good diets and believe they are doing the right thing find that they are exposing their children and their unborn infants to the great many toxins that exist in our society. These exist in the form of mainly petrochemical products and plastics. Plastics are absolutely insidious, folks. They really are. They are doing so much damage to society and have already done so much damage to our society. And these chemicals and the way they inhibit our immune systems, our reproductive systems, our cognitive systems, everything about what it means to be human, these compounds are found everywhere in everyday products and in everyday environments all around us. It's very, very difficult to get away from these things. And this is what has caused a huge loss of direction in the human race. It really has. It's caused people to become more disassociated from themselves than they ever have been before. We've seen this developing in young children. Notice the effeminization of men that's been happening. There are far more effeminate boys being born these days, far less alpha males being born. Little boys are really not what they used to be when I was a child. And this again is a result of plastics and phthalates and synthetic estrogen, which is found in virtually every product that we handle on a daily basis. This has also resulted in a huge reduction in the male sperm count. Actually, a frightening reduction in the male sperm count to the point that we are quite possibly heading towards human extinction if we don't do something to clean up our environment and get these petrochemicals and plastics out of such widespread use. And that may sound like fear-mongering, folks, but it's really not. In the last 50 years, the male sperm count has been reduced by around about 50%. And what we're finding now in recent studies is that the general male sperm count is, on average, over the general population, about 20% of what it should be. And as I said, this trend is going to continue if we do not get these chemicals out of circulation. But unfortunately, as I said, they are everywhere. They are in the food that we eat. They are in the plastic wrapping in all the food that we buy. All plastics contain these chemicals. They are in the tubing, intravenous tubing that's used in hospitals. They are in the paint that's on your walls. They are in the synthetic fabric that is on your couch. They are in your clothes. They are in your carpet. They are in the plastic interior of your car, the plastic handles of tools that we use. They are in the plastic chair you are sitting on. They are in the plastic keyboard that you are typing on. They're in your laptop. They are on your iPad. They are in your phone. They are in the plastic watch band that you wear. They are in the plastic necklace that you wear around your neck. They're the things that keep your clothing stain resistant, and the things that make your curtains fire resistant, and the things that make your fabric soft when you wash them. They're in the hairbrush that you brush your hair with. They're in the toothbrush that you clean your teeth with. They're in the plastic toys that we give our children to play with, in the slippery slides and play equipment that we give our children to slide down in the playground. They're in the rattles we give them in their cots and in the teething rings we give them to chew on. They're being pushed into young men who are sports-minded. You think about a young man playing basketball, handling a plastic ball, not a rubber ball anymore. These balls are plastic. Handling this plastic ball with sweaty hands, jumping around on a basketball court wearing synthetic shoes that are leaching toxic chemicals into his body through the feet. The feet are very, very open to accepting chemicals through the soles of the feet. This is a very, very active place on the body. And people have been wearing synthetic shoes now for some generations, and this is also causing a huge amount of damage to male reproductive systems and the sperm count in general. The plastic lining in cans, the very soaps, shampoos and conditioners that we're washing our hair in, the plastic bottles that we buy drinks in, we buy detergent in, that we then use to wash our plates with, the plastic handles on the taps, the plastic toilet seat in the bathroom, the plastic shower alcoves that many people have, plastic cups, plastic plates, plastic knives and forks. We go out and do anything, we put what we're taking with us in a plastic bag. And all of these plastic items leach phthalates and synthetic estrogens into the food that they're around and into the people who handle them. And this is such a serious problem that it's almost incomprehensible to figure out how to fix this problem. Because even if you were to ban all of these products today, they still exist in everyday life, in every single home in the Western world to an incredible degree. In fact, Western homes are virtually made from these products, as is almost every item that we buy, that we use in our kitchen, that we use in our tool sheds, our food processing units, our blenders, our juices, all are made from these products. Even when people go to a health food store and they buy something that they think is healthy, very often it is wrapped in plastic or comes in a plastic bag. And these plastic bags and products all leak synthetic estrogen into the food, and this is a very serious problem. Not to mention the fact that there are still many people using plastic baby bottles with plastic teats on them, and the damage that this does to infants is quite literally profound. The thing is that people never knew this. We were just given all of these products and we were told to use them. We were told that it was all okay. But what we've done is we have surrounded ourselves with an incredibly toxic environment which is doing so much damage to the human reproductive system and the development of humans in general, that it's very likely that if we do not pay attention and do not take the matter in hand very soon, the species simply will not survive our own need for convenience and our own need for profiteering and putting economics over the needs of the people. Ultimately, folks, it can't lead to a good spot, and the spot that it's leading us to is a lot worse than probably anybody ever really imagined. But I think we're just about at break time here, folks. I'll leave it there for now, and we'll go and have a break. Thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company, and I'm sorry to be bringing you such uncomfortable information, but, well, I'm just trying to help. But we'll go and have a break, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, so looking at what we're facing, looking at how prevalent these toxins are in our environment and the toxins in the food, the vaccinations that people undergo, not to mention the education that they get, it's no wonder that people are having a difficult time navigating this society. And it's no wonder that kids growing up today are having a difficult time navigating their own sexuality. The transition from child to adult has always been a painful process for any child growing up, regardless of gender. But the trials and tribulations the kids are going through today far exceed anything we went through as children ourselves, simply because of this chemical damage that's been done to them, unbeknownst to themselves and unbeknownst to the parents. Society has gradually changed over the last 50 years, and people haven't really noticed it happening too much. They've been too distracted by the television and too distracted by all of the wars and all the theatre wars and all the stuff that's presented to us. And none of this would be possible without television, folks. I'm sure they wouldn't even be able to wage all these wars they wage without television, because they wouldn't have the support from the people in doing so. And television has very much promoted the acceptance of this transgenderization of our society. The subtle programming that we've received through the television to make it more and more acceptable to be gay, make it more and more acceptable to be transgender. And look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with gay people. I'm certainly not homophobic, but there is definitely a transgenderizing of the species happening. And the promotion of gay acceptance and the promotion of acceptance of transgenderism is done very much as a smokescreen to cover up the fact that this is happening anyway, so you better well accept it, because that's just the way your child is going to grow up. So by doing this, they kind of cover their tracks a little bit, and they just make it acceptable for this to be the normality. But really, it's not the normality at all. Of course, there's always been a certain percentage of people that are born homosexual. That's just the way it is. But the fact of the matter is that the sheer amount that we're seeing now is not normal by any standards, and it is a result of the chemical modification of the human race, whether this has been done purposefully or it's just been a byproduct of using plastics. is a topic that anybody should feel free to debate. But the fact of the matter is that it is happening. It's very real. It's happening right in front of our faces. The reason for it is the products and the petrochemicals in our environment. And if we're not prepared to talk about it, we're not going to be able to fix the problem. And we need to talk about it, and we need to fix the problem, because if we do not, the drastic reduction in the human sperm count that we're seeing, I mean, think about it, folks, 50% of sperm gone in the last 50 years. In the next 50 years, if this reduces another 50%, then the race will essentially be infertile, and there will be very few human beings born at that point. It won't be a matter of white genocide or Black Lives Matter. It will be a fact of everybody is disappearing because no one has the sperm count to be able to procreate their race, regardless of what that ethnicity happens to be. So people seriously need to put aside all of their racial differences and all their ethnic idiosyncrasies and realize that we are all in this position together, and what is happening is affecting the entire race. And it isn't just affecting the entire race, it's also affecting the animal world as well. And that might be somewhat surprising for many people to hear, but it's due to the runoff from our sinks, the toxins and the estrogen-causing compounds that are in everyday products that we use, in dishwashing liquids, in hair conditioner, in shampoos and soaps. Women's makeup and all sorts of stuff contain these estrogen compounds, and these are washing down into the lakes and river systems, and they are affecting the fish, the frogs, the alligators, and everything else. We're seeing a loss of males in the ecosystem and a reduction in the size of male genitalia in the ecosystem among many animal species that are living in close proximity to where they receive wash-off from human habitation. And the really disturbing part is, folks, that it's likely not just from the products. It's likely not just from the shampoos and conditioners and dishwashing liquid. It's also simply from running water through a plastic hose and letting it wash down the drain, or emptying water out of a plastic bucket or a plastic bottle and letting that wash down the drain, because any water that you have in a plastic bottle or in a plastic bucket is having estrogen leaked into the water by default, simply by sitting in the plastic. And this is what is contributing to the change of human sexuality and a loss of males, a reduction in the male birth rate and a reduction in the male sperm count, not only in humanity, but also in the entire global ecosystem. And look, don't get me wrong with all of this, folks. I'm not saying that there are no boys being born and that everybody who is being born gay. It's not like that at all. It's just that the percentage has shifted. And sure, you're going to find that there's still the odd alpha male being born, but when you look at the overall statistics, you find that the strong male is disappearing from this world. The strong alpha male that always stood as the hunter or the protector or the worker is disappearing from this world. And this isn't just a problem that is affecting the first world. I mean, you look at some of the issues we're facing, the chemtrails and a lot of the GM food, a lot of these problems are facing the first world more than the third world. But when you think about the plastics and the damage the plastics are doing, well, these plastic baby products and these plastic swing sets and plastic slippery sides and plastic bottles, Coke bottles, drink bottles, detergent bottles, plastic buckets, all of these things are well in use in every country on Earth. So it's affecting all people right across the board in all nations. We have to go back to using natural products. And that's going to be a very, very difficult transition for people to make. But hopefully it's something that will unite the people, simply because it's an extremely serious issue, and it's an issue that does affect every single country on Earth and every single family on Earth. In fact, everybody who uses plastic equipment of any kind. You know, we are quite literally facing so many issues, ladies and gentlemen. We really are. The 5G grid that's rolling out that I've been focusing on for the last 4 or 5 shows, I do want to focus a lot more on that, which I'm going to do next week. I've got a lot more information about where this is going and the whole transhumanist agenda as well. That's been actually snowballing, the amount of information that's been coming into me regarding all of this stuff. In fact, so much that there's no point even beginning to talk about it this late in the program, because there is, as I said, so much information to bring you. But we are facing so many issues, and The issue of the toxins and the issue of the transgenderization of this world is a very, very serious issue. And unfortunately, the media and the government itself has promoted this kind of political correctness that is masqueraded as this acceptance of gays. And again, I'm not criticizing gay people with any of this, but even gay people that I know can see that there are far more gay people in the world than there ever used to be, and that the alpha male is disappearing. And a lot of normal families, a lot of normal alpha males are having incredible difficulty in getting their wives pregnant because the sperm count is so low in most human males. And regardless of whether you're gay or straight, or whether you support people who are gay or straight, regardless of what your ethnicity is, regardless of what your religion is, this is a problem that is affecting every single man, woman, and child on earth that are using plastic products. So, as disturbing as it is, it's a topic that seriously needs to be put on the table and needs to be addressed, and people need to put all of their homophobic ideas, all of their defense of gays, all of their social justice warrior ideas. Put all of these things aside for the moment and let's sit back and look at this as a biology experiment and a biology observation, and let's look at where a species goes when it gets to this point of decline. Because that's where we are, folks. The human race is in a point of decline. And we can turn it around, but we have to pay attention to what is happening. And the politicians are not going to do it. The media is not going to do it. Nobody is talking about this issue. And it's a very, very important issue that needs to be put on the table. And people need to start discussing it with their friends and discussing it with their families and start paying attention to what products they're using in their everyday lives. They seriously do. Otherwise, we're simply not going to have a race. And no matter what you think about this world, if you're someone who wants to have a child, and even if you're bringing a child into this world, well, what sort of a world do you want that child to grow up into? And don't you want that child to grow up with every potential and to at least develop into a normal human being, to have every potential to develop into a normal human being, and to have every potential to develop its own natural sexuality as well? Whether this is straight or gay, let nature decide. Let's not chemically induce one outcome. Because that's what we're doing simply by using these plastic products, and we're doing it without realizing what we are doing. And when you look at all this, folks, it makes perfect sense for them to have been promoting this mass acceptance of gays under the guise of actually caring about gay people, when what they're actually doing is covering up the fact that they're turning the entire world gay by saturating the entire world with plastic compounds, because these compounds release their own form of synthetic estrogen, both as a gas and just in touching the products, you absorb this into your skin. And when you consider these things have been used as intravenous drips and bags to hold fluid that they actually hook up to drips in hospitals, and you realize how many pregnant women have been given chemicals that have been held in these bags and put through these tubes, and put through all sorts of plastic regulators and clips and taps on the way to the vein as well, it's no wonder we've seen this change in human sexuality. Now, all this might seem like it's rather off topic from what I started talking about, which was the problems people are having identifying with the world. But really, when you look at it, folks, you begin to realize that a lot of the problems the young kids are having, young men growing up, young women growing up in this world are having, are because of the chemical alteration of their basic structure. Their basic composition as a human being has been altered very often in the womb simply by their exposure to plastic products. This has happened unbeknownst to the parents. You can't blame the parents for doing this. Of course, a lot of parents do feel very responsible for the situation because they should have known better. But really, they were told that these things were safe, so you can't blame them. And these products are so prevalent in our environment now, and they're affecting the way people think. They're affecting people on a metaphysical level, a psychological level, as well as on a physical level. So when you take all of this into consideration, then you see where the problems that we're facing are coming from, and you see what has happened to this species. And as I said, folks, it comes from all angles, the genetic modification of the food. And like I said, the programming that goes along with television, the subtle programming, even the clothes they're wearing and the setup of the room that they're in. These things provide social standards for you to measure yourselves by. The way they cut their hair, their body language, the way they hold themselves. All of these things provide a version of reality which is not real, but it's a version that people emulate without really knowing that they're doing it. You know, people dress like the television, they act like the television, they speak like the television, they do what the television tells them. All they talk about is what was on the television or what was in the newspapers, all of which are run by the television. It's the same people. It's just this culture, this mentality that has been superimposed over reality. And most people have taken it on, and so it has become reality. But it's a program. Everything we're running is programs, and even when we try to find a way out of this mess, we go to a programmed response. We look for leaders, we try to form a group, we want to act within the legal system. We've already established the legal system is completely fictional. It's just there to control the masses, not to afford any remedy to the masses. And yet we still go down these paths. We don't ever really look up from our desks, look away from our screens, and just open the window, look outside and see the world for what it is, and see us for what we are. You know, if we were to simply stand up as people and realize that there are no legitimate masters, there are no legitimate slaves, and we just don't have to do this, we could change the world. We really could, you know. It's people's loss of confidence in themselves that has created all these problems. And really, when you look at the way the youth has been brainwashed, the way the youth is brainwashed all the way through school, and people are given a completely false view of the world. They're given this economic view of the world, and they think that's what success is. It's no wonder that we find ourselves in this state that we're in now, the position that we're in now. But it's really getting to the point where humanity's back is against the wall. It really is. Our back is being pushed fair against the wall, and it is time for us to stand up for ourselves. And as I keep saying, the only way we're ever going to do that is through a unity of consciousness, a unity of people, respect for people. You know, we've got so many people now in the independent media that know there's a problem, and they just won't unite. They have these little issues. You know, the Christians won't unite with the non-Christians. The flat earthers won't unite with the globe earthers. You know, the whole independent media now, you've actually got media sites now listing themselves as alt-right. We are alt-right media. I mean, there is no left and there is no right. How did we suddenly find that we've created a left and right within the independent media in the response to the system? We know there's no left and right in the system. It's all theatre, and now the independent media has even let their egos get so far in the way of reality and so far in the way of the truth and so far in the way of freedom that they're separating themselves by claiming to be either alt-left or alt-right. It's ridiculous, folks. There's no unity. Everything that we've done to try to bring some freedom to the world, we've just created all these little boxes for ourselves, and now everybody won't agree to disagree and focus on the main issue, which is the establishment of freedom. I mean, what happened? So when you take all this into consideration and you see that the young people coming up that are waking up and turning to the independent media trying to find some answers, they just end up completely confused as well because they can't find any agreement in the independent media. And there's been a whole bunch of new channels that have popped up in the last 5 or 10 years that are just out there associating everything they can with every conspiracy they can find and criticizing anybody who disagrees with any point they make. So they've spread a massive amount of distrust. And this seems to be the order of the day. And so we've got some real issues in creating any unity, and unity is what we need. You know, if we don't have agreement on some issues, if we have different concepts about who might be in control or which rabbit hole we want to go down, it doesn't matter. It's okay for people to have their independent research. It's okay for people to have disagreements about things. It doesn't matter. You know, we've got a common enemy here. We've got a common foe that we need to be focusing on, and we're simply not doing that. You know, the real issue, I think, is that too many egos get in the way. Everybody has an agenda. Everybody wants to exalt themselves as some type of guru, and really it's not about that, folks. You know, we've got such serious issues facing us. The direction that we're going, if people really want to take the blinkers off and look at the world, the direction that we're going ladies and gentlemen, when you take everything into account that I talked about through the show today, all the plastics, all the danger that this is causing for us, the loss of sperm, all the stuff that's happening, we're virtually heading towards extinction. Couple that with the whole 5G grid and the active denial systems that have basically been put in place through all of our cities, which is what the 5G grid is, the Internet of Things, the cashless grid, the vaccinations, the chemtrailing, everything that's going forward. And if you really think that setting yourself up with a viable business where you can sell books for the next few years or whatever is going to get you out of this mess, then you've got rocks in your head. You really have. We need some unity, because it doesn't matter what type of business you set up. You can set yourself up as some type of guru selling books or doing tarot or whatever, and in another 5 or 10 years, you're not going to have the business anyway because you didn't pay attention to the world around you. You know, people get these little bits of information and they want to set themselves up as an authority and some leader, and they just sit there and feed people information all day, and they never encourage anyone to act. They never encourage anyone to get involved. They never actually get involved themselves by any other means except disseminating information. You've got to get out there and get involved in the real world, ladies and gentlemen. You really do. You've got to make a stand against this cashless system and lead by example in what you do. And immersing yourself in your own ego and setting yourself up as some truth guru and having an agenda to sell books is not really helping. It's not really leading by example, and it's not really doing anything that's going to bring about any real change. And people need to see that we are in a state of clear and present danger. The entire human species is in a state of clear and present danger. It isn't a case of Black Lives Matter. It isn't a case of gay rights. It isn't a case of white genocide. It's a case of the entire human species being in decline due to the toxic nature of the environment we've created. And we're continuing to create every single day that we sit here and argue with each other about minor details of our environment, minor details of the system, pointing the finger at who we think the controllers are or whatever. You know, every day that we sit here and do this, and we continue to shop with credit cards, we continue to use our smartphones, we continue to use all these plastic products, and we don't make a stand by simply stepping away from all this and refusing to comply with the system, then every day we are simply marching closer to totalitarianism. No matter how much we say, no matter how much we point, no matter how many people we talk to, if we continue to buy into all these products and buy into this system, then we're just digging our own grave. It doesn't matter how much of a rebel you think you are. If you're complying with this, if you're shopping with credit cards, if you're buying into the smart grid, and you're not making a stand against this, then you're not really doing anything at all. That's the situation that we're in, folks. It doesn't matter what gurus are out there and how much you think you really know what you're talking about. It doesn't matter how much of an ego you have and how much you want to set yourself up as the be-all and end-all that the people are looking for, which is what so many people seem to want to do. It's not going to get you anywhere, because you're not going to have an audience and you're not going to have the life that you have now if you do not pay attention to what's going on and realize the need for unity. We need a full spectrum response to this system, folks. We are under a full spectrum attack, full spectrum dominance. That's what they called for. Remember the PNAC paper? Full spectrum dominance. That's what they called for, and that is everything. That's the airwaves, that's military, cyberspace, everything. Control of the social systems, control of the money systems, control of everything. And that's where we're heading, and we need a full spectrum response to deal with it. And we've got to realize what the system is. The system, the matrix, is all around you. It is everything that you do every day, every appliance that you pick up, every tool that you use, every time you pull your credit card out of your wallet, every time you glance at your GPS or your smartphone. That is the matrix, ladies and gentlemen. And it is up to you whether you want to choose to disconnect from it or not. But really, when you look at everything that I've said on the show today and you take all of this into consideration, all of the social issues that we talk about, all the social justice warriors that are out there fighting for whatever little petty issue it is, all the people dealing with their racial or ethnic stand that they're making, all the people standing up for their national pride or their national ethnicity or their right to do this or their right to do that, all of them are facing a common foe, the foe that has put them in the position where they have to protest what they're protesting, and the position where they view the people around them as being their enemy when they're really not. They're all in the same boat with them. They're just focused on a different issue because the government has created a different issue for them, which will pit them against you. That's what they do. Divide and conquer. It is a perfect tool and it works wonderfully, and that's what they've done to our society. The whole society is divided and fighting amongst each other over issues that have been created by the system itself for them to fight over. But there's a common foe, there's a common focal point. And if we can put down all these differences and agree to disagree, don't worry about it if the person next to you has a different skin color or a different racial ethnicity, or for that matter, a different sexual persuasion. It doesn't matter for the moment because there are bigger issues. We need to put all of this aside, put all of these differences aside and focus on the bigger issues, because we are seriously running out of time, ladies and gentlemen. We really are. You know, when I come onto these shows, I've been doing these shows for 9 or 10 years now, and I really try to keep things positive. Everything I bring you, much of it is very, very disturbing information, but I always believe that there is a silver lining. And I still believe there's a silver lining. I don't think it's all over yet. I mean, the fat lady hasn't sung. In fact, I think we have all the information coming to the foreground now, and the real danger that we are in is becoming apparent for everybody if we can just realize what it is and realize that all these other issues are just side issues, all these mysteries. We'll find all this out later, but we've got a clear and present danger we need to deal with now. And I think a lot of people are waking up and realizing this, and I think this is bringing a huge opportunity for the human race, and I think we are heading for a time of great change. You know, it could be very bad change if we don't pay attention. If we allow ourselves to go down the path that we're being led, it will be a very bad place. It will be very bad change that we get led into. But there is a huge wave of awareness growing on this earth. A lot of people are waking up to the fact that they've been played, and they've been played on so many levels, it's just ridiculous. In fact, I think that's why they do so many levels. They make so many things obvious, so we've got so many little petty issues to fight about, because again, this perpetuates the whole divide and conquer strategy, and it's a very effective strategy. That's why we've got people fighting over the vaccines, and people fighting over the GM food, and people fighting over the whaling, and people fighting over Fukushima, and people fighting over the wars. They're not realizing that each one of these issues that they're fighting about is simply a symptom of systemic corruption, and that is where their focus should be. And if they were to focus on that together, they would very likely bring some healing to the situation. But everybody has their rabbit hole, and everybody believes their rabbit hole to be the most important rabbit hole. And that's why they are constructed the way they're constructed. And of course, when we try to fix these issues, we do it with the red tape created by the system, which is there to tie us up in that red tape and ensure that nothing ever really gets done, and that no issue is really solved, and that no one is ever looking at the bigger picture because they simply don't have time to. And that's really the only way I've been able to figure all this stuff out, folks, because I've spent most of my life on the outside of society, and I've been able to look at it without really getting involved in it. But folks, I think we are at the end of this show here, so I'm going to have to leave it there for now. It's been wonderful coming and talking to you today. I'm sorry about the uncomfortable nature of some of the information. I've got a lot more to bring you next week regarding the 5G issue and the transhumanist issue. This is really going off the charts. It's snowballing, and as I said, the information is coming into me in massive amounts at the moment. So keep it up, folks. The people that are writing to me and sending me this information, I'm looking at all of it, and it's really good to be getting this amount of input. But that is it for me, folks. Thank you to all the people who continue to listen to the show. Thank you to anybody and everybody who donates to the Patreon account. That is the only thing that keeps myself and this show on the air. So I cannot thank you enough for that. And if you can afford to throw a couple of dollars a month in there, folks, it would be greatly appreciated. Who knows, I might even be able to get some assistance at some stage if I could get enough in there. But anyway, thank you for joining me on there today. It's always a pleasure to have your company. I will look forward to speaking to you again next week. Please take very good care until then, my friends. In Lakesh.